Okay, right now it's just me, just a slight delay. We're doing another TNG Hour. Underappreciated episodes. Last time we did worst episodes. This time we wanted to do best episodes, but it felt kind of unnecessary to... Oh, there he is.
Yeah, a bit of a more of a process to join this time.
Yeah, I used a different streaming platform because purely by accident, because I used it for the other streams earlier.
Yeah, yeah, I'm always a little bit wary of connecting everything. It's like they want to
And
know so much
yeah,
about you. You know what I mean? Like it's,
yes,
I don't know, it's
I
weird, but
know.
I guess I get it too because this way no idiots can. But they wouldn't have the link anyway because it's I don't know. I don't get it,
Yeah,
but it's fine. I did it, so yeah, we're good now.
yeah, and we
And
can.
everything seems to be working.
Yes, for the first time since we've been doing this, I think we can hear each other from the start.
Yeah.
I can even see you.
Yeah.
I'll turn my camera on too. There
Yeah.
it
Okay.
is.
I'm gonna get me a drink.
You're just waiting a second till the beverages are fetched.
Oh. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Righty. My 6-pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I already did like an intro of what we were supposed to do. Last time we did worst episodes, and now we wanted to do best, but not do the generic, the top 10 that everybody has.
Oh yeah, I mean, what, like the common list, the one that.
No, what we wanted to avoid was just doing, best of both worlds, chain of command. It's boring.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we can talk about that. Do we think it's underrated? Well, I didn't put it on my list because I figured it was a fan favorite, but I don't
Yeah.
really know.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought would be best to avoid. What do you have first on your list anyway?
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I mean, I got. I actually took a couple off my list because I didn't have a chance to watch them, and I was just
I
kind of
see.
remembering from way back, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not really sure. Like, I kind of wanted to watch them again, but I don't really. I don't know if they. But I might mention them as honorable mentions when we get to the end. Plus, especially as I think we're probably both going to have some of the same picks, right? So
Yeah.
so we get through 10. So yeah.
So what is first on your list?
Oh, you want me to go? Okay.
Yes.
So we're already okay. So yeah. All right. So my first pick then is an episode from season 3. These are, by the way, totally at random. So
Yeah,
I kind
mine
of
too.
mixed up the list rather than going in season order because I think it makes them more interesting and there's less chance that we'll collide when we're not in chronological order. So my first
Yeah.
one is an episode from season 3 called "The Most Toys."
Huh.
Really, really like that episode. Don't hear too many people talk about it. Um, it's definitely, I think it's got one of the more interesting, kind of psychologically dark antagonists. I guess a lot of the time, like, so there was an episode in season 2 called "The Schizoid Man," where some guy tried to supplant Data's personality with his own and stuff, and it's like it's suitably off-putting, but then at the end he just kind of changes his mind and like it's kind of weird, like very sudden. Whereas in
Yeah.
this episode, which the ending is a lot more satisfying,
It
and
is.
it's just this guy's kind of irredeemable. He's a real piece of work. And Star Trek
Yeah.
TNG doesn't do that very much. A lot of the time, the antagonists, there's something to be said for a guy that's just rotten. you know.
Pretty
So,
much.
and he has this weird relationship with the woman assistant or whatever she is, and it's definitely like there's a lot of stuff under the surface that's kind of like very dark implications. He just has to own everything special, right? And he's kind of like reminds
Yeah.
you of one of these really evil, spoiled rich guys who just like has to, he lives on his own private island somewhere and just has to own all
Yeah.
the great treasures of the world and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
And
like the big game hunters who go to Africa and shoot the rhinos and lions and whatever.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's some. I guess the episode kind of does something that I'm not always crazy about, in that that like a character is fine, well, sort of fine, but like the people on the ship don't, right? So everybody thinks Data's dead for a few minutes there, but I don't think they don't hammer it on too much, and it's not like it's actually done quite well. I haven't watched too many Enterprise episodes, but one Enterprise episode I watched did this really badly, where they're on a shuttlecraft. I think it's Trip and
Trip
what's
and
the other guy?
Malcolm and Shuttleport 1.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, and it's good, but it's like, we already know that they're okay. So
Yeah.
and then or that the Enterprise is not destroyed, right? So it's kind of like it would have been better if that was revealed at the end of the episode. We don't have to spend time on the Enterprise, right? We should spend the whole episode with those two characters, so we don't know at the end of the. I mean, even though, okay, the show's called Enterprise, so we can pretty much bet the ship's probably going to survive, but still. And here in this episode, though, it's like, yeah, Data's not dead, but he's not in good hands. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a problem. And I don't know. Yeah, I really like this episode. I like the ending a lot because it's an interesting character moment for Data, because he takes a life, and it's like kind of a big deal for him. So yeah, that's my first one. I really like that episode.
Yeah, I wanted to start out with something that's on the one hand personal, because it's the first episode I remember really fully watching when my sister's girlfriend, boyfriend at the time, asked me to tape TNG for him while they were going on vacation. That was the first one I remember seeing fully and watching fully, and that was in season 4, Remember Me, where Dr. Crusher is trapped in a bubble, and everyone she knows is disappearing one by one.
Yeah,
and I still like it because it's so greatly played with all the other characters being completely oblivious to people disappearing and being totally fine. Yeah, it's totally normal. There's just 100 people on the ship.
I'm not sure why, but for some reason I thought you didn't like that episode.
I like that, and it's like I said, the first one I fully consciously saw.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I mean, that I think somebody else pointed this out on the internet, so it's not my thought really, but I think one of the most fun things about that episode is when it's just Picard and Crusher and nobody else, and Crusher's like, she knows that something really weird is going on, right? But Picard apparently doesn't. And she's like, so you seriously think that this gigantic ship at this bridge with all these stations on and everything, it was just meant for the two of us to fly around in space? And Picard's like, yes, of course. I know it seems strange, but it's the most bizarre thing. It's like it's kind of adds this absurdism to the episode that I think is really fun.
It's definitely it holds your attention with the way it progresses with fewer and fewer people, and it makes less and less sense. And this is one of those great examples where they, the opposite of what you just said, where they don't reveal the mystery too early. It keeps you guessing for a bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it was really strange and off-putting to put yourself in her shoes and kind of realize, oh, like everybody's going away, and
Yeah.
they think everything is normal, and you're like, well, what the hell's going on? Has everybody been replaced, or why are they? It's a bizarre concept actually,
Yeah.
but somehow they make it work. So
Yeah.
and then the traveler
It's
shows up.
very. Yeah. The plot is very Twilight Zone, Outer Limits type of stuff, which TNG always did great.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, that's it for my first list entry.
Okay. My second choice is an episode from the 6th season called The Chase. Yeah, so again, this is one of those weird things where you would think that more people would talk about this because it seems kind of significant, because after so many years, Star Trek finally offers a sort of kind of explanation for why so many of the alien races depicted on the show are so very humanoid. And yeah, it's kind of funny because I've been watching TNG with my two young Romanian buddies recently online, and they've never seen Star Trek before. I think I mentioned this in the last episode, and we were watching an episode recently, and somebody did ask that, and I was like, "Well, why does it shouldn't be very human?" And of course, the practical reason is, it's difficult to depict very aliens on screen all the time. That's the kind of thing that makes people go, "Oh, it's one of those ridiculous sci-fi shows with monsters and people in rubber suits."
Yeah.
I happen to like that, but I mean, I can see why Star Trek often goes for the simpler approach of just putting some funky makeup on a little bit, and it's just like taking it. Yeah, it's just. I mean, and they do occasionally push the boat out and show more alien creatures, but it's very rare. And generally, I've noticed that in the books, which I haven't read too many of recently, that's for sure, but the books tend to explore that a little more with some very aliens. And that's not very surprising either, because it's much easier to do that on the page, right? So anyway, The Chase, it's got Picard doing some archaeology, although he seems really baffled in the opening scene, which is kind of funny. And it's actually got some similarities to another episode that's on my list that I'll bring up later if you don't. And I like that. I like that aspect. I like the investigation. It kind of feels weird because it's just so independent of anything else on the show. Like it almost feels like so much more could have been done with this. But I mean, at the same time, it's a really cool diversion, and yeah, I mean, it does bring in a little bit of tension, and there's some, big revelations at the end that don't really get talked about too much, and that there was some race that seeded the galaxy with humanoid life forms, and that's why it's a common type that you see a lot, and so it's almost like the writer of the episode was like getting asked this question a lot and got annoyed and just sort of came up with an answer to it, I guess. But it works. And I don't know. I think it's unlike some of the season 7 episodes that try to deliver big revelations but can't really do anything with them. Even though this never gets brought up again, to my knowledge, maybe the preservers get mentioned a few times later on. But I'm satisfied with this one. I'm not really bothered that it's just like this big revelation brought up at the last minute that means nothing. It's fine. Like, it's fine the way it is, actually. So
yeah, to me it's different. For me, it bothers me a bit that it's never brought up again, never explored further. That
Yeah, I think that
Annoys
is
me a
fair.
bit. But they do that with all the ancient species they introduce in episodes, like the Iconians or the Tekon Empire or whatever. Gets mentioned once and then never again.
Yeah. Okay. More on them later, maybe. uh, yeah. I don't disagree with you. I guess it's just a matter of a case by case basis. In this case, it doesn't really bother me. I think it's one of those things where on certain shows like Star Trek, there's just so much room for people to imagine other stuff. I don't really think the show really has to come back to everything. I don't see it as a
Yeah,
weakness
no,
all the time.
definitely not. But for something that big,
Yeah.
I would have assumed so. Anyway,
What's
I
your
got
next?
an episode that is pure fun, pure entertainment from season 4. That's Disaster, where the Enterprise hits not a cosmic string, but a something filament, and the whole Enterprise is knocked out. And Troy and O'Brien and Ro are on the bridge, and Picard is in the elevator with the children. And Data gets his head taken off, and Worf helps Keiko give birth.
Yeah,
Worf
well,
plays the midwife.
Worf has to be a midwife.
Yeah. And that episode is basically just pure fun, action, entertainment. But it does it really well.
That's interesting.
Funny enough,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, funny enough, there's not much more to say about that because it's anything but intellectual. It's just like basically it has disaster in the title, and it's like a disaster movie turned into a TNG episode.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I appreciate it as such.
that's cool. That's not an episode that I've watched more than the one time when I first saw it in the early '90s. I don't think I've ever watched it again, but I should. It just it didn't really occur to me to put it on the list, so I'm glad. I'm glad that our lists are different. That makes it way more interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Again, I'm sort of at a. There are some episodes because I haven't watched them in a long time. I would like to watch them again at some point. And there's some that I'll probably never watch again. There's some of which I probably talked about last time because they're just really really
Yeah.
dull or something, right? I remember them
Yeah.
being bad, so I just never come back to them. That's one that I don't have. I mean, the thing I remember most is Worf delivering the O'Brien's baby. That's the
Yeah.
thing I remember most. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's brought up again in Deep Space Nine when she's pregnant with the second baby. Worf plans his long shore leave when it's time for delivery.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I mean, there's a lot of crawling around in the ducts of the ship and stuff like that,
Yeah.
from what I remember. Kind of, I don't know. I don't remember too much about the episode besides that. I don't remember what caused. Oh yeah, and you said Troy was on the bridge, right?
Yeah, the first time Troy is in command.
Okay, giving her something to do.
Yeah.
Nice. She doesn't really get a chance to shine too often, does she?
Definitely not.
No. I don't know. I don't know. It's a kind of a running joke among many fans that I've noticed that in season 2, Guinan shows up and she's like instantly outdoing Troy at her job,
Yeah.
like right away. And the thing is, because she's still a guest actress, Guinan's not in every episode, right? You wouldn't think that the ship's counselor would necessarily need to be in every episode either. So it's like it's really weird. They made some weird decisions.
Yeah, definitely.
Starting that show, and yeah, I never loved Troy as a character either. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's too bad because I mean I don't think it's a. I know Gates McFadden was pretty adamant that the creators of the show had some sexist tendencies. I don't really see it that way myself, but that's just because, maybe not being in those shoes, I'm oblivious. But to me, it does seem like they had problems with the women characters on the show, the regulars. Like, none of them really stepped out into their own as much as they should, maybe. I guess Crusher kind of does eventually. But yeah, I don't know. So I guess one I considered putting on the list but didn't is actually one that has a considerable role for Troy as well. Actually, two. So I might mention them in honorable mentions or something. But yeah, they're not really on the list, but they could be.
Sure.
Okay, so my next episode, again, I don't know if some of these are considered fan favorites or not. I honestly, I'm not that in touch with Trek fandoms, so there are some that I assume that most people talk about, but others I'm just not sure. So maybe this is a popular episode, but I think it's not, because I bet you if people say the name of this episode, they think of another Star Trek story entirely. And yes, it's another case of Star Trek reusing a name that's already been used. I'm talking about the fourth season episode called First Contact. Nice Riker featuring episode. I always like that. He's one of my favorite characters for sure. And yeah, I like him. I like a lot of TNG is just so quiet. It's just very quiet, set on the ship. There's not really a lot of stuff going on outside the atmosphere of the Enterprise. Like, even when they might be visiting another planet or something like that. It's like it's very, I don't know, it's very, very centered on that location of the Enterprise. And this one feels very different. Like, right away, as soon as you start watching, it really throws you into the deep end. There's no captain's log. There's no, it's like Riker in this kind of almost modern day Earth-like situation. It's not really, but it feels kind of contemporary. Like, it feels like they could have gone back in time and set it, in 20th century Earth, and it could have had a lot of the same beats. But because it's not, they also have this alien culture when the Prime Directive comes into it and stuff like that. And by this time, TNG had already explored the Prime Directive stuff a few times. But to be fair, they get better and better at it with most of the episodes as they go. Like, I just watched the episode Pen Pals recently, and it's kind of unsatisfying. Just like, I'm not really. I mean, it was kind of a nice character thing for Data, but there was like nothing going on in that episode. So, and this one is way more exciting, tense. Riker's kind of out of his depth. And he meets this cool woman who's, she's into him, obviously, and she's also into the fact that he's an alien. So, and it's like she ends up kind of saving his butt. So I enjoyed that. It was one of the better, I guess, Riker interactions, with a woman that he's kind of into, even though I guess maybe he's using her a little bit, but not.
More like
not
she's using him.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. So I don't know. It's I like these kind of first contact scenarios, and I like the suggestion that actually the whole Prime Directive thing is really complicated, because in reality, the people on the Enterprise do missions like this, where they disguise themselves and go around pretending to be something that they're not, so that they can figure out whether it's actually a good idea to make first contact or not. It's kind of shocking that it throws you into the deep end like that, because there's been no indication that the Enterprise crew would ever do anything like this. It's just, it seems like maybe a weird job for Riker to be doing, but I like it. He seems like a person that would be suitable, because after season 1, they really changed his character. In season 1, he's like all smug and superior, and he's like, the Federation is the best, and nobody does things quite as well as we do. And I think later on he tones that down a lot, and he's the kind of the person to throw into these kind of situations, and he does really well for himself.
Yeah.
Because he's not that judgmental, at least on the surface. He's not that smug anymore. Probably experiences like this that make him calm down. So yeah.
Yeah.
Was that one on your list?
No, it wasn't.
Oh.
I looked at it, but I don't know why it isn't one of my favorites, because it's good. It's just not in my top 10.
Okay.
Maybe in my top 20.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I got one I recently rewatched and kind of forgot how good it was, and that's Ensign Row, which has all these intrigues between the Cardassians and the Federation, using the Bajoran terrorists as pawns. And it's really interesting because you start out in one situation, and the situation constantly changes as new evidence is uncovered.
Right.
And showcases how the Bajorans are entangled in this web of powerful powers. Don't know how to put that better. The big players are kind of using them in their games for territory.
Right.
And of course introduces a new recurring character who starts off pretty nice. Like Rolaren, the conflict is pretty great, and Riker giving her a hard time because of something she did in her previous post.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, sorry, my throat is really not great today. He does that thing where she has to take off the earring, even though it's okay for Worf to wear his thing around his shoulder. And Riker says it's a regulation, but in reality, I think the regulation is not strictly enforced if Worf is wearing his thing. So he only does it specifically to get on her nerves.
Yeah, that's another one I haven't really watched recently. So what's your favorite moment in that one?
My favorite moment is when they meet the alleged bad guy of the Bajorans, and the reveal that the Bajorans actually have nothing to do with the terrorist attack that started the investigation.
Yeah. That was actually one that I took off my list because I remember it being good, but I hadn't watched it recently, and I was like at the last minute, I was kind of thinking, yeah, but do I want to include one that like I don't actually remember how good it is because it's been over 30 years, maybe 30 years since I watched it.
Yeah.
Almost. So it was. I actually made the list, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna watch some of these, and I only had a chance to watch like 2 or 3. So I didn't get to that one. So I'm like, yeah, I better not include it. But I do definitely like her. It seems like obviously it's a sort of a dry run for DS9 in a way. So yeah, I mean, and actually, Ensign Rowe was supposed to be on DS9 at first.
Yeah,
she wasn't.
I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we got Kira. I like her a lot, but I guess like Rowe, it was one of those characters that perhaps they could have gone further with, but they did a pretty good job with her when she was there, and she was definitely not your
Yes.
typical Enterprise crew member. So,
Yeah.
and she's in one of the episodes on my list. So yeah, but it's okay. So the next episode that I have randomly chosen is the season 1 episode that I'm going to mention. I'm often a champion of the early years of TNG, seasons 1 and 2. However, if I'm pressed, I will say probably not too many of the season 1 episodes do deserve to be mentioned here. Maybe some of them do, and there's a couple of others I considered. But the one I ultimately chose is actually, it's always one that, I don't know, it surprises me that people don't like it more. Maybe it's because of the elephant in the room, which is that it's the one episode where a main character dies, and that is Skin of Evil. Yeah, sorry, I really like this episode. I think it's really good. Again, now we have a very alien, although I don't know what I think about the sort of woo-woo mystical idea of like being able to capture all your race's evil tendencies and dump them into one creature. But it's kind of cool in a way because it's like, they can just, it feels very mystical and kind of like not very Star Trek. And I guess maybe it's not. Like the writer of this episode was Joseph Stefano, who is better known for one of the main writers on the show The Outer Limits. This is the original Outer Limits from the 1960s, which is one of my favorite science fiction shows. So, I like this episode. It's, who knows how many rewrites it went through. All the writers in the early days of TNG pretty much complained that their stories went through too many rewrites. And unfortunately, a lot of the time they had to do, like the writers had to do the rewrites themselves, which you would think is good. But if Gene Roddenberry's asking you to do 7 or 8 rewrites, it gets a little bit too much. Like, I don't think any writer's being paid for that. And they also said often that the changes he was asking them to make didn't necessarily make the story better. They just made it different from the original concept or the original conception, and not necessarily, to improve the script, but to make it more along the lines of what Mr. Roddenberry wanted. So, but Skin of Evil, I think I really enjoy the different feel it has from a lot of the other stuff. It's again, every so often in these early years, you get like the TNG crew is very smug. They're pretty full of themselves. But something happens to shake them up a bit. And I think this is one of the early cases of that. Tasha's death is very sudden. It's like a Blake 7 death. That's a reference to 1970s British show where pretty much everybody's up for grabs when it comes to the body count, including the main crew. And the reason for that in the show is the same reason for Tasha Yar being expendable, and that is that sometimes the actors just decided they didn't want to continue. So the show had to come up with a quick way of getting rid of them. And I don't know, maybe it's not dramatically satisfying, but it's certainly more realistic than most TV deaths, because usually when characters die in film or television, it's dramatic. It's like there's a lot of foreshadowing. There's something built up around it. It has to mean something. In reality, death is usually pointless. It doesn't mean anything. It just happens. And it stuns everybody because of its non-dramatic nature. So this somebody, like the Enterprise, we've talked a lot before about how silly it is that there are kids on the ship because, something bad could happen at any moment. They could just die. And, it's wouldn't you want to keep them safe? I mean, just because their parents volunteered for this doesn't mean the kids did. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. And yeah, Tasha Yar, on the other hand, is not a child. She knew exactly what she was getting into. And I actually find the last scene, although it is a bit heavy handed, uh, I find it quite poignant, actually. And the music is excellent. Uh, and yeah, Armus is really unsettling. And at the end, they do that thing where it's all down to Picard in the end. He has to confront the antagonist. And I guess watching seasons 1 and 2 now, as I have been, it's kind of interesting realizing just how much Picard really is the main character of the show. I mean,
Yeah.
he's usually the one at the end who has to make the grand speech or has to do the big thing. And yeah, it's like he's not even involved early on, but in the end, he has to step in and say, "I'm not taking you anywhere." And you know, and you have this like raging oil slick screaming its pain into the universe in emptiness.
Yeah.
And it's different. It's a different episode. Again, it's like an episode where you have an antagonist that is, as Data said himself, truly irredeemable. And yeah, it's kind of funny also because he doesn't just kill everybody outright. He's kind of he has got this like grumpy sense of humor, which
Yeah.
I sort of enjoy also. So I don't know. Yeah, I enjoy this episode. I think it's an underrated gem in the first season, and maybe my suspicion is that people don't like it because they have a sour taste over Tasha. Not just her death, but I guess the way the character was treated in general by the show, to the point where
Yeah.
Denise Crosby is like, "Yeah, I had enough of this. I want to leave." So, um, yeah, I mean, if they had done this, if they had done this in order and the episodes were shown in order, the last moment, and I'm asking you guys to think about this, the last moment we would have seen of Tasha Yar would have been her hilarious anti-drug speech in Symbiosis. That was the last thing they filmed. So imagine if
Yeah.
the episodes were shown in the order of production, that would have been the last our last memory of Tasha. But instead, it's that rather touching, if unsubtle, speech to the crew. And
Yeah.
as one of the, I can't remember if it was the director or somebody else who was working on it, pointed out, don't ask me how she knew exactly where to look at the various crew members since she was a hologram. But, she did somehow. So, yeah, I don't know. It was good. It's a good episode. I was never bored once while watching it. And it's a good example of season 1 doing something right.
Holograms can be programmed to be interactive.
Yeah.
So that's fine. And yeah, since you mentioned the most toys, I also have one. I don't know how popular it actually is, and that's Allegiance, where Picard gets abducted and put in a cell with 3 other people.
Oh, yes.
And they
Is
have
that your next pick?
food. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They have food that the monstrous guy cannot eat, and they have a complete pacifist who will not who will bow to any authority that speaks to him and will not ever fight back. And the monstrous guy wants to eat him. And Picard has to unravel the mystery of where they are and why they are there and how they will get out. And at the same time, a fake Picard is on the Enterprise, acting kind of strange, singing songs with the crew and having
I love
dinner
that.
with Beverly.
Yeah, it's another aliens fucking with us episode.
Yeah.
So Star Trek does a lot of those. And it's kind of funny when you talk about TNG and it's kind of those episodes when it comes down to them, it's like you all have to kind of describe them in the same way. And it's like, yeah, it was aliens fucking with the crew because they wanted to study them, basically. And this time, yeah, it's Picard specifically gets abducted right from under everybody's nose, just randomly. But it's good. I actually I didn't put it on my list, and this is really interesting because so far we haven't had any. I haven't had to not go through any of the items. So I'm curious, maybe that's if we're gonna run over each other at any point. But Allegiance is one that I actually watched. It was a rare case of an episode I probably saw on transmission in the early days. By the time of season 5, I think I was watching pretty regularly. But before then, I would just catch an episode every now and then. So it was like starting with the battle, which I mentioned before, which was the first one that I watched, and I was still a little confused about the whole Next Generation thing, not featuring Kirk and Spock at that point. And I saw a few episodes in between there, and I think even one time I thought that TOS was showing on a station, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just keep watching Star Trek. It'll be cool. And like, I watched the Journey to Babel episode for the first time, the TOS episode. I'm like, yeah, that was really good. I want to watch the next one.
Yeah.
And then I tuned in, and I don't know if it was me or if it was the station. Maybe I tuned in at the wrong time, or maybe who knows. But they were showing TNG instead of TOS, so I was very confused once again. And it was the episode Captain's Holiday, but I think shortly after that one, they must have shown Allegiance. And that was when I watched it. So, and I remember liking it then, and I still think it's a good episode. I especially like the singing.
Yeah. And I like the set piece of the people being locked in one room.
Yeah. The people that are with Picard are kind of nondescript, but I kind of like that one of them turns out to be one of the aliens.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Being in one room makes it forces it to be very dialogue based.
Right.
So they have to figure it out just by talking, which is kind of a classic for television. All the characters in one room, and they have to solve the problem just by talking.
Yeah.
And it did that pretty well.
Yeah, it's another classic Star Trek scenario where I mean, when you get down to it, so much of Star Trek is really about that. It's about solving problems, and it's part of what makes the show both entertaining, but also you kind of feel like you are more than just being entertained, right? Like you're also kind of learning something along with them sometimes. So I don't know if this is the best example of that. Again, it's kind of an aliens fucking with us episode, and I have to kind of choose what's the best example of that on the show. And you probably know what I think, but maybe we'll get to that later. But yeah, a good episode for sure. I definitely one that it's got that childhood fascination to it, where it was like one of the first kind of episodes that you watched. And I don't know, it's good. I like it too. The next one that sorry, did you have anything else to add about that one?
No, but for your next one, I'll just make a cup of tea. I'll still be able to hear you, but I'll mute my microphone for like 2 minutes while my electric kettle boils the water.
Yeah.
I'll still be able to hear you.
All right, well, next one that I have picked out is a season 5 episode. It's called The Next Phase. And yes, Edson Rowe is in the episode. And Geordie LaForge is also in the episode. Well, I mean, he's in most of the episodes, but it's kind of, one of the main characters. They think that Rowe and LaForge are gone, dead. And there's been a Romulan mishap on a Romulan ship, and again, it's a situation where, like in several other episodes, like the Most Toys, people think that the characters are dead and we'll never see them again, but we know better, and this time they're just invisible.
I'm still here. One moment.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just checking something. But so they're invisible, but also we get to see Riker's band, the Dixieland band, which is a fun anachronism on Star Trek, where they have a celebration, and I guess I don't know. Everybody assumes that Ensign Ro likes Dixieland jazz. She probably doesn't, but who cares, right? So I don't know. I don't know if this is the first time we get to see. I mean, it's not the first time we see Riker play the trombone, but it's the first time I think we see that he's got a band together, which does come up at least one more time later. And yeah, there's some really touching stuff where Data tries to remember his friend, and he's like missing Geordi, right? And everybody's telling him different things, and Worf is telling him that what would a Klingon do, right? And I don't know. I guess the invisibility thing has always been something that sort of fascinated me, because sometimes it's like I would. It's a weird thing for me to say, but yeah, sometimes I would like to be invisible. It would be interesting, and it would also be an interesting reversal of the situation that I have, where I can't see anybody else. So it would be kind of cool if nobody else could see me, I guess. And so, even though, yeah, it's pretty crappy for them because they can't really interact with anybody either. Like, nobody can hear them. It's not just that they can't see them. It's an interesting scenario, and of course, you got the Romulan on the ship as well. So adding a little bit of tension to the situation, and I don't know. Ro seems to be, again, it's like a lot of display of different cultures and how they handle death and the idea of death. Like Ro kind of figures they're already dead, and before just like that's impossible. Like we wouldn't be able to interact like this, and like we're clearly somehow still on the ship. We're just like, and so he's determined to figure out the problem, whereas Rose kind of accepted it. But in the end, when she realizes, oh, maybe he's right, we should try to get their attention. And yeah, Data manages to save the day and get them back. So, situation resolved, but it was a good one. It was a good 45 minutes of an interesting exploration of a situation, and again, problem solving, right?
Yeah. This was actually just random chance or pure luck that we didn't clash into each other, because at the beginning of this stream, I kind of looked at my list and thought, damn, I forgot that one.
Oh,
I
yeah?
should have put that on the list, but I forgot.
That's well, I mean, I think we can't think of everything, right? So that's yeah. So you like that one as well?
Yeah, I definitely. That's a great episode, with them trying to come to terms with their situation, because in the beginning they don't know what happened. They have no idea, and then trying to get the attention of everybody.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
And they kill a Romulan just by pushing him through the wall.
And again, I'm just tickled by the whole Dixieland jazz band thing. Like, it's so weird, and it's but I dig it. It's just one of those weird Star Trek things that we've talked about, where everybody seems obsessed with old art and stuff that's like, even sometimes like stuff that wasn't really considered cool during the time the show was made. So it's like, yeah, okay, why not, right? I mean, they could have been a Duran Duran cover band, but
Yeah.
instead it's Riker on the trombone, and the rest of
Yeah.
them are all doing the Dixieland thing too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Basically, it's like the tap dancing Dr. Crusher. That's so typical for Star Trek.
yeah.
Some weird niche fringe interest. I mean, the real world explanation is probably because the actors were into it, but it's still fun to think that people in 400 years in the future, yeah,
Yeah.
like Dixieland or tap dancing or Sherlock Holmes or
Oh
all
right,
that
yeah.
stuff.
Dixon Hill.
Yeah, Dixon Hill.
It's not a real person, but just sort of based on or not a real 1940s character, I should say. But based on like Raymond Chandler and Philip Marlowe books and stuff like that. And, yeah, I don't know. It's it is an odd thing, but something that apparently is commented on Deep Space Nine, where Bashir is. I don't remember for sure if he's talking to Garrick, but he's like kind of observing that humanity doesn't really create any spectacular art anymore, and that's why people are kind of obsessed with the past, which is really interesting. Uh, I think that it's maybe a sign that this post-scarcity society is actually really bad for artists.
I think it was that episode where Garrick was gone and he was trying to use Chief O'Brien as the Garrick replacement.
Oh yeah,
And he's
okay.
just talking and talking and talking, and O'Brien just wants to eat his meal.
So apologies to Starf who might be listening because she she had to turn off the last one because we started talking about Deep Space Nine and we're watching it now. So
I see.
don't want to spoil anything, but I don't think it is really a spoiler. It's just an interesting conversation that was had. So, but yeah, what's your next pick?
In the comments by Multiplayer Dungeon, TNG was kind of a nostalgic IP. I think it makes sense within that context that they would have nostalgic interests. It's also such a neat juxtaposition. There was just a comment about that in the chat.
Yeah.
What I have on my list is clues where they discover a wormhole and think they might have discovered a habitable planet, and then they all pass out. And after that, they realize more time may have passed than they thought. And a comment by Stellar Star, you're fine, haha, wasn't too much of a spoiler.
Okay, interesting choice. Yeah, that's yet another one that I haven't revisited too recently. So
Yeah, another mystery solving episode.
yep.
And a lot of these heavily feature Dr. Crusher. For some reason, she's in a lot of the mystery solving episodes. But that one, I think, is one of the best when it comes to that kind of storytelling, where they need to figure out all the clues they have. Like, Worf apparently had a broken bone that he didn't remember and stuff like that. And they had plans that grew further than they should have.
Right.
And then Deanna Troi finally turns into Elia from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where she's like going around with a deep, distorted voice, possessed by the alien.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, they were meant to be. She was based on that character too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. I wonder if they did that on purpose. Yet they gave her an Elia moment.
Yeah. So is it just? It's not just her though, right?
It is her. Just she was taken over as the spokeswoman for the aliens.
Yeah.
And Data was ordered to never reveal anything, and he gets into more and more trouble for not revealing anything about what happened, even though it became more and more clear that he knew. Anyway, that's an absolutely great episode in my opinion, and I watched it a lot of times. It's one of my favorites. Because again, they don't reveal the mystery too early, but step by step. And
Yeah.
then have a nice finish.
Right. So is that the one where Data knows what's going on, though? Right.
Yes.
Yeah, but he can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that, and yeah, that's a pretty good one actually.
Oh, I forgot.
A lot of the time, yeah, they would do this kind of thing on the show where there was this big mystery and people didn't really remember something important. There's definitely a few. I mean, we've talked before about the show being sort of formulaic, but not in a bad way. But it's just sort of something that happens where there's only a certain number of types of episodes usually, which makes the ones that don't belong to those types stand out. But there's definitely quite a few episodes that you could say, well, they're a little bit similar to this, like the episode Conundrum from season 5, where they are on, they can't remember something. Something is missing from their memories, and there's like an extra person on the ship that we've never seen before, and they treat them like they belong there. But we, the audience, know, okay, something's funny is happening with that person. Who are they? Why are they here? And he's like, the crew doesn't notice anything amiss, but we do, and so yeah, this one, yeah, it's a good one for sure. Yeah, I didn't think about it, but when I was making the list, I did look through all the episode titles and little
me too.
short things about each one. It's like, okay, yeah, I remember that one, but yeah, that's a good choice, definitely. And I guess another cool thing is you think that Data might be like compromised somehow, like he might be, I don't know, you might have turned evil or something because he's like hiding something from the crew. Maybe,
and that's exactly what I mean by not revealing the mystery too early, because for a long time you think that something has happened to Data.
Right. Yeah, and I guess again, the idea that Data might be compromised is more terrifying in some ways than that somebody else might be, just because he's so powerful in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it has happened before in Brothers, where he's called by Dr. Noonien Song.
Yeah.
He takes over the Enterprise.
Right. I mean, one that's not on my list, is the power play, and in that episode, Data does get like he gets, but it's not just him. It's again Troy and Chief O'Brien, and they're all kind of possessed by aliens, and it's not really an awesome episode in my opinion, but I don't know. It definitely has an interesting tense situation, and again, it's like they really show that actually it's Data's like android, I guess, qualities, but also his loyalty and inbuilt sense of loyalty to his shipmates and Starfleet and stuff like that, which prevent him from being kind of like Lore and unpredictable and like violent and stuff. And if he was like that, even Worf could not stand up to him, right? So yeah, I don't know, but
someone in the chat is asking if you're drinking blood wine from that skull cup.
If what?
if you're drinking blood wine from that skull cup.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah, it's just Rickard's. Oh, it's Rickard's red. Oh, you can even see the color of it. It's quite something. My camera's working this time. Yeah. It should be that. It's decent Canadian beer, but yeah, it's and yeah, my awesome skull glass here, mug, I should say. Yes. Okay, so my next choice is a season 6 episode. Yeah, and it's another one that features Riker extensively, and it's the episode "Frame of Mind."
Yeah, that's one I didn't pick because I thought it would be too much of a fan favorite. Because
see, I don't
that
know.
episode is awesome.
So I picked a few that might be fan favorites, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe, but again, not having a lot of contact, I don't necessarily know. I mean, obviously stuff like Best of Both Worlds and Redemption and like
Yeah.
Probably Chain of Command. Like I'm pretty sure most people like those. Measure of a Man.
Yeah.
I'm quite certain that they are fan favorites. But some of these, yeah, I'm not really sure. So maybe people like that episode a lot. So I don't know. I'm mentioning it anyway. I kind of feel like maybe it doesn't get talked about much, and the reasons that I like it are kind of like, again, it's this bordering of reality and fantasy, and I think the way it starts out as a play, and well, it really focuses on that actually aspect throughout, really, and it feels very. I don't know. It feels like Star Trek, but also, I guess, postmodern, like sort of meta commentary and stuff like that. And then it's like we're using the play, and it's not just the cold open where it's like people are doing a play, cool. It's like they're having fun on the Enterprise. It's actually part of the story, and yeah, Riker is kind of unhinged in this episode. He's apparently been through a lot, so. I actually highlight quite a few of his episodes. I'm just kind of realizing now in my list. So, like, there's another one coming up, which I think is not similar exactly, but yeah, it's sort of it's a weird thing, It's not everybody enjoys his character as much as I do. I think some people think it's just like, oh, he's the Captain Kirk of the Enterprise. He's likes to sleep with all kinds of different women, and he's kind of a tough guy, right? But I don't know. I think there's more to him than that for sure, and definitely his his relationships with women usually don't seem one-sided, or they don't seem like he does not. He's not just, I don't know, a player kind of character, right? So. And I don't know, Jonathan Frakes seems like a pretty cool person and quite canny. And, he directs. I'm not sure if he did any TNG episodes, but certainly in a lot of the later series, including some of the modern ones, he's done some work behind the camera. So, and the films, of course, First Contact and Resurrection. So, but yeah, it's kind of this questioning reality. I don't know, sort of maybe Philip K. Dick influenced Star Trek episode, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that we're really not sure what's going on through a lot of the episode, and it's so bizarre that it starts out and you're thinking, oh, it's just one of those nice cold opens where we see the crew relaxing and they're having fun, except maybe they're not really having fun, right? Like maybe something serious is going on here with Riker, and we kind of got hints of that throughout the episode, and we're not sure what the reality of the situation is. So I like that aspect of it very much. But you said it's probably a fan favorite. You may be right. But I don't know. I'm including it anyway because I'm not certain. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of Riker, a fan favorite of mine not a fan favorite of mine. I'm mixing up the two things. A favorite of mine. Is the episode Schisms. I think it's from season 6.
Yeah. Another aliens fucking with us episode.
Yeah, exactly. And another mystery episode. And I just really love that scene where they are in the holodeck and try to reconstruct that table that they're on. And they don't really remember, but subconsciously they remember. And then bit by bit they reconstruct that table with the arm and the instrument and all that. And that is such a great scene. And it's like the center of a great episode. It also has the ode to Spot, Data's poem, but the center is the them trying to reconstruct what happens to them at night. And it's a perfect, great TNG mystery episode. And I really like it.
Okay. Yeah, I like that episode, but it's not, for some reason, it's, I mean, I get what that scene is going for, but it just seems too perfect to me somehow. Like, it's almost like the computer knows more than they do. And it's like
Yeah.
able to help them in a way that doesn't seem like it should be able to. You know, it's like, I know the holodeck is very cool and versatile, but it's almost like I can't see how they were able to make it so close to the reality that they would remember. You know,
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. I never 100% bought that, but I do really like the episode still too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely that part is a bit unrealistic. That first the table is made from wood.
Yeah.
And it looks like a regular table, and then they change it to metal, and it immediately looks like a hospital bed. And that's kind of a jump. As if they had like some extra scenes and skipped over them to get from the wooden table to the hospital bed looking kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean that is facet of the 45-minute format. You know, it's
Yeah.
sometimes Next Generation episodes and maybe other Star Trek shows too, but sometimes they seem like there could be a lot more. You know, I mean, I guess I like episodic television. I'm actually a fan of that because I come from a time when you generally only had one television in the house and you had to fight over it with everybody else in the house. So you didn't always get to watch what you wanted to watch sometimes. And so, I mean, it's nice to just be able to tune into a show you like and not feel like you're missing something, right? And so I personally appreciate that. I understand that we're not living in that era now and most people expect something different. But I also am not somebody who really dedicates to shows that much. So I have a lot of trouble sticking with something and watching it like episode after episode after episode. And even when I rewatch Next Generation, it's totally random episodes that I pick. You know, it's not like it's, and now, you know, when I'm watching seasons 1 and 2, I have been skipping some episodes. So that I know that, okay, it's not really something that I want to show to a new person. Right? Like it's maybe they can watch it later. And yeah, Schisms, the mystery is definitely fascinating. It's one of those, like, again, set entirely on the ship pretty much. And so you get to see people in their element. And Riker, it sort of starts with him, not really. He just thinks it's a very basic problem. He hasn't been sleeping properly. But, and yet, he knows that time is passing and he doesn't remember lying awake at night, but something certainly seems to be happening. So, and of course, one of the most memorable things about that episode is Data's poetry reading with everybody falling asleep as he reads a poem about his cat.
Exactly.
The Ode to Spot. Technically very sound, but ChatGPT could have written it, right? That's the kind of so, yeah.
Felis catus is your taxonomic nomenclature.
Yes. Endoformic quadruped, carnivorous by nature. Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess the next one I'm going to pick might actually be a fan favorite. But hear me out when I pick this one because I think I'm picking it for a good reason. And that's the episode Q Who.
I see.
Okay, so it's the episode that introduces the Borg, right? And it's obviously an important episode, and apparently I think it won, or at least was nominated for some Emmy awards. So it's actually had some notice in general TV land in America, which is good. Now, the reason I think that maybe it's underrated is everybody, and I mean everybody, talks about the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it's a landmark episode of television and our two-part story, I should say. And it's, Captain Picard becoming a Borg, right? It's, wow, how could they left on that cliffhanger? It's so, wow. But sorry, episode 2 is just not as good as episode 1. It's just not. And here's the thing about the Borg, and I don't know if this is probably not controversial to say, but they're kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like, there's not really, I mean, the thing is, like, every time you use them, you have to come up with something new to do with them.
Yeah.
You can't really confront them on the same level as you could the Klingons or the Romulans. They're not very
they don't
dramatic.
have characters. They don't have characters.
Yeah.
Like, if you meet the Cardassians, there's a different type of character every time.
Right, exactly. And the Klingons say they're always theatrical. They are, really bombastic, over the top characters that are like just awesome to be to witness, right? The Borg are just implacable, cold machines. They don't have any personality. When they do try to introduce personality to them, it reduces them to the point where they're just normal now, right? And this so I think that actually my favorite appearance of them is their first appearance because they're totally unknown. They're not even necessarily the main focus of the episode because the episode is called Q Who. So it's it's kind of Q's episode, but they're there and the glimpses we see of them are pretty amazing, right? So it's like, I mean, I'm a horror fan. So for me, I like not really knowing a lot about the adversary. I like the mystery and the feeling of, I guess, insecurity that brings because you don't know exactly what the stakes are. And I think, not that this is a horror episode exactly, but I think there's a parallel in that what I think makes really good horror fiction in film or literature or whatever, a lot of the time it's two things. It's really bad things happening to people who don't deserve to have bad things happen to them. And it's ambiguity where you don't really know exactly what the rules of the game are. And that's what brings about the feeling of terror, because the feeling of terror is an anticipation of something bad to come, but it's also unknown. So an actually really good horror story ends just before the really horrible thing, in a way. Like it ends before the gruesome sight because you don't quite know what's going to happen. And that episode gives me that feeling.
Yeah, I can see
Borg,
that.
it's diminishing returns every time they appear. It's like less effective than it was the last time, with the possible exception of First Contact. But like that's not part of the series, so it's kind of. And again, I like they seem formidable again at that one after TNG already kind of reduced them with Descent, where just kind of like, oh yeah, so this is what we've come to now. Like, yeah, we really don't need to see the Borg again after that, do we? I mean, it's just kind of
and
in Voyager, it's just like yeah, bring the sexy Borg chick onto the ship. Why not, right?
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I mean, I see in a way that they had to do something different with them if they wanted to keep using them, because
Yeah.
like you were saying, there's no drama in the interactions with the Borg. There's just tension.
Yeah.
So the first time is going to be the most effective, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And yeah, Q is really cool in this episode. I think this episode kind of marks a change in his character, where he's sort of like, you kind of realize, you know what, like, yeah, he's mischievous and he's kind of like the Loki of Star Trek, but he loves these people. He loves the Enterprise. Really, he wants their
Yeah.
validation. He wants, like, he's not like a villain necessarily. He's kind of like a spoiled child, right? Because he can do anything
Yeah.
he wants, and yet, wow, he pretty much says in this episode, he's been going around the universe his entire life. He can do whatever he wants, and yet, Jean-Luc Picard is the closest thing he has to a friend.
Yeah.
How odd is that? So I don't know. Yeah, a very effective episode. Everything about it is cool, I think.
Yeah.
And yes, I know that people probably like this episode and they know that it's significant because of the Borg and all that. But I think that it's probably not talked about enough, and
Yeah.
I'll include it on the list for that reason.
Probably the first time that Q gives the impression that he's trying to actually help humanity.
Yeah.
By preparing them for what's out there.
Makes sense.
And here I have something on my side list that I'm almost certain is a bit of a fan favorite, but I still think it doesn't get talked about often enough. And that's Hollow Pursuits,
Uh-huh.
the first Barclay episode, which is just all the holodeck scenes are hilarious. Especially I am the goddess of passion. No, I am the goddess of empathy. That's it. It's a holographic Troy. And it has a good story on the side where things on the Enterprise mysteriously fall apart. Gesundheit. And
Duncan.
they have to solve it, but Barclay is the only one who figures it out, how to solve the problem.
And we get to witness Barclay's amazing fantasies.
Yeah. The Three Musketeers and the goddess of empathy and everything. And there's just really this challenge that he's the one figuring it out, but because nobody takes him seriously, the challenge is for him to get through to everybody else.
Yeah. And he has so much trouble. Because he's not he's not like Mr. on top of the world like most of the Enterprise senior staff are. Most of our main characters, they never seem to have any trouble saying the right thing, although they would undermine that in some episodes. Like, I don't know, I mean, Geordi, at the beginning, Geordi seems like the cool person, the cool guy, right? Like, then I don't know, we were kind of talking about that last time, where they kind of seem to change the character and make him awkward. And like, it's not really either of our impressions that it was that way before.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't necessarily mind it. Actually, one of the episodes I did watch was Booby Trap, and I know you're not a fan of it, but I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was terrible. In that episode, at least, he seems aware that he's kind of experiencing a fantasy, and he's not like ridiculous about it. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I don't know. For some reason, the idea that Geordi has so much trouble getting dates and stuff like that, like, it just seems weird.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem like it should be that hard for him, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people are.
Yeah. Geordi definitely. He has his strange moments, like in the episode with Scotty, where Geordi is suddenly the asshole for a moment, and Scotty tries to fit in.
Right.
so they do these random changes. And Barkley, I remember they based him on Michael Piller, who also really had problems connecting with people, and they even used an actual quote from Michael Piller, the one where he's sitting in a room admiring a plant at a party.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to see the showrunners making like an effort to show that society has evolved to a point that these people can fit into a starship like that.
Yeah.
Which is in a way a great way to connect to the fans, because a lot of them have similar issues.
Right.
Like Barkley was kind of a stand-in for the fans.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I can definitely see that a little bit. It is kind of a stereotypical idea of what the nerd, I guess, the not nerd, but like geek kind of character who's like really good at a certain thing, but maybe social interaction is certainly not one of them. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think in this episode, so do you like this one more or the Nth Degree?
I like this one more, but the Nth Degree is actually right below it on my list. But I kind of view both of them as kind of belonging together. Like, can't talk about one of them without talking about the other one of them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really different for Star Trek actually showing somebody who's so insecure, I guess, and like kind of has trouble bringing himself across, and just feels awkward. And at the beginning, you feel so bad for him because it's like everybody is talking about how he should be transferred. Like maybe he doesn't belong on the ship. Picard sort of speaks up for him without ever having met him before, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, but a very Picard thing to do.
Well, yeah, and he's like, "What? He made it onto this ship, so he must be good, right?" Like, I'd have faith in the whole recruitment process, basically. There's no layabouts on this ship, so yeah. I mean, it is though. It is a Picard thing to do, and then he still calls him broccoli by mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got it from Wesley, of course.
What's that?
He got it from Wesley, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Wesley is the guilty one.
Yeah. So, how many times does Barkley actually appear? Is it 3 times?
4, I think. It's those 2, and then there's Realm of Fear with the transporter psychosis.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he turns into a spider in Genesis.
He's in that episode, eh? Genesis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the one who's causing it.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't watched that episode since then.
I always watch that episode because it's just too funny with Picard turning into a monkey and Worf turning into a monster and everything. It's just so ridiculous. It's fun.
It's really funny. A lot of people seem to really dislike that episode. I don't remember
I like it
that
because
bad, but it's just kind of, I don't know. This has never really come up again for me. So yeah. I forgot that Barkley was in it.
Well, Dwight Schultz playing a guy who turns into a spider. That was a great scene he had in that episode. He's talking really fast and always moving really close to people.
Oh yeah.
Having these abrupt spider movements.
So cool, man.
Yeah.
I thought maybe I'm including one of the first 2 Barkley episodes, but at the end of the day, I didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Good choice. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Feature Mr. Riker in an episode from season 3 called "The Matter of Perspective." Always really liked this episode. Interesting use of a holodeck type thing to try and reconstruct something that might have happened. It's something that we kind of hinted at before when we were talking about schisms, but it's done very differently here, and I like the way it's done. Kind of reminds me of that famous Japanese film Rashomon, where you have several different perspectives on the same scenario, and you're like, well, which one is closest to the truth? And at the end, it's Star Trek, so it kind of resolves in a way that's like more satisfying than head scratching. It's more like, okay, we know what really went on now, but just the setup for it is really good. It's like a kind of a murder mystery type thing, and they just do it really well. It's an episode that I remember first seeing when I was visiting my mom's fellow, and just sort of sitting there probably around dinner time on a Friday night or maybe a Saturday, eating most likely Kentucky Fried Chicken or ordered pizza or something like that, and just watching this episode and being like, yeah, that's an intriguing mystery and featuring one of my most favorite TNG characters and saying some things that you wouldn't think Riker would really say, like the famous "You're a dead man, Arkvar, a dead man." Like, it's just this whole situation of this kind of like unhappy scientist's wife or something like that, and she's like, it feels like, again, a real classic murder mystery scenario, and it's done in a way that I think I would like to see Star Trek do more often, in a way, because I don't know, especially some of the early episodes, they just make it seem like, again, it could be the Gene Roddenberry thing, I guess, but seem to want to make people think that humanity had solved most of its problems, and like, I don't know. I mean, I guess by season 3, he was kind of not really holding onto the reins so tightly, and maybe shit like that does actually still happen with humans in the Star Trek universe, and we don't really believe for a moment that Riker is that guilty. I don't think, but at the same time, I mean, they set up a really interesting situation, and I think they use the technology of the show to their advantage in a way that I think is cooler than usual. And you kind of wonder, is this how investigations usually go in this future? Like, that's kind of interesting. It would be interesting to work as an investigator in the Star Trek future, if that's what it's really like. And I don't know. I like this episode a lot.
It's funny, though, that the technology nearly destroys their own ship.
Yes. Yeah, that too. And, creating fictional scenarios and making them seem as real as possible, as real as the show we're watching on television right now, which is also a fictional creation. So, again, it's the meta stuff, right? I mean, I don't always like that. I think in a lot of modern productions, it can go a bit too far. Like, kind of, see, we know we're watching a TV show. Are we clever? That's not really. But, they do a good job here. I don't know what number we're at, though. I've lost track of the number of picks.
No idea. I just, I don't even have numbers on my list. I don't even do it in order either. I just pick, because I wrote them down as they came to me.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of making up an order of my own. But I still have
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah, it's still fun
also have
left.
a couple as well. At least, uh, at least one. Maybe the rest are honorable mentions, I guess, because I'm not really sure about them. But yeah. Uh, okay. So yeah. What's your next one?
One I really like is from season 7, Parallels.
Oh
Worf
yeah.
goes through Worf travels the multiverse, so to speak. And then he's married to Deanna Troi, and then they have 2 children. And then Riker is captain, and he has to get back to his own universe.
Yeah.
Will Wheaton shows up as tactical officer. And
So I do remember enjoying that one.
that's just a really fun episode showing all the different ways TNG could be.
Mm.
And they do a great job on the set design and costume design, that it's constantly changing. Every time Worf gets dizzy, everything is suddenly different. And
So I guess.
nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Go
Finish
ahead.
saying what you're gonna say, and then I'll speak my objection.
I was just saying. At first, he's the only one who notices, and the others don't notice. But then, the people from the new universe he goes to know that he's switching between realities because their Worf is doing it too, and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
So I guess my objection to this episode, even though I like it, is that it keeps changing. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but on the other hand, it doesn't really give us a chance to really get used to or think about any particular scenario. So recently, for my podcast, we did a Star Trek book called The Wounded Sky, which I think I might have mentioned in a previous TNG Hour. Um, and in that book, reality was fractured, and different crew members were experiencing different environments, and Kirk had to try and round them all up and try and get them to focus on solving the problem. And so he had to find everybody in whatever environment they were in. Um, and the idea was good, but I just thought it was too quick. It was too like we
Yeah,
don't get to spend time in any of these in particular. It's just like one moment Uhura is singing in a nightclub, the next moment Chekhov is climbing a mountain or something, and the
yeah,
next moment it's this, and it's like there's no focus on any particular thing. So it just kind of seems like we're randomly going from one thing to another, and I kind of do get that sense from that episode. Which leads me to a question for you: uh, do you ever think it would have been cool if, like DS9 and like TOS, Star Trek TNG had ever done a mirror universe episode like Mirror Mirror?
I don't know. I didn't like the DS9 ones very much, so I'm not sure if it would have worked for TNG. Even though, of course,
Right.
the actors could have pulled it off perfectly. I think evil Patrick Stewart could have been great, and evil Brent Spiner, and we saw in Power Play already evil Deanna Troi.
Sure. So there is actually a novel, Star Trek novel called Dark Mirror, which is the kind of TNG equivalent of that kind of episode. So it does have, yeah, the mirror universe, and I guess it's supposed to be the same one, where
Let's see.
that Mirror Mirror takes place in, and I guess the DS9 ones too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've done it again. I've maybe potentially spoiled a bit of DS9, but not really. Well,
Yeah.
we'll go over it quickly. Where I won't go more into it, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a thing that happens. So I don't know, but I do like episodes that feature Worf as a main character as well. So I mean, it is
Yeah.
pretty cool to see him go through all this. Was this the beginning of the Worf Troy thing? Did it start with this episode?
I think so. I'm not 100% sure.
because they actually did become an item in season 7.
Yeah, they did. But I think it was also it started with Troy taking care of Alexander in some when Wolf was away or something. I don't remember because
Yeah, I
as
don't know for
soon
sure,
as
but this is where it started. But
yeah,
uh,
as soon as Alexander is involved, I kind of tune it out.
yeah, okay. I wouldn't be surprised if that was where. I don't know. I haven't watched that episode for a while either, so
Yeah,
it's one that I wouldn't watch again probably, and will soon. Now that you mention it, probably it will
yeah,
be actually something that I'll move forward in my priority rewatch. So
yeah.
but yeah,
That's
good.
all I have on that.
I mean, I always found the uh, putting, I guess, showing our characters if they had developed in a different way to be really
Yeah,
interesting. I mean, I like that kind of scenario, and yeah, I mean,
mm,
Doctor Who did that in 1970, and a lot of books, have done that. But I think when it's a TV show with an ensemble cast like Star Trek, it's kind of particularly interesting because we know all these people so well, and it's the same regulars in every episode. But if you just see them be kind of different,
yeah,
what would their lives have been like, right? And it's an interesting question, definitely. So yeah,
yeah,
I would like to watch that episode again soon. Maybe it's not really even as fragmented and like random as I remember.
yeah.
So okay. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. All right. So my last, I think this is my last. I'm gonna pour another non-red wine here. A
Mm.
fine Canadian ale.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Sound effects. Um, my next episode, we're gonna go to season 2.
Okay.
Okay. This is an episode that I personally really enjoy. You kind of
Mm.
hinted at this earlier, so maybe this is one of your last ones, and I apologize if it is, but I do have a couple of others that I could potentially bring up after. So this is the episode Contagion,
Okay.
and yeah, really good episode. What I consider a very satisfying episode with a lot happening. So often with TNG, I'm a little frustrated by the way the episodes pan out. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, obviously we talk about this show a lot, so I can pretty much admit that I'm a fan. But
Yeah.
there are things that frustrate me about the show a lot. One of them is how determined some of the episodes appear to be trying to be insignificant.
Yeah.
Another one is like the way that the plots are juggled and paced, and the way a lot of episodes have an A plot and a B plot, and it's like you could tell one of them is there to please the sci-fi fans, and another one is there to please the family viewing audience kind of thing. And usually one is far more satisfying than the other one. Sometimes it's actually the B plot rather than the A plot. Sometimes it's more satisfying.
Yeah.
Depends on which one
Yeah.
has been worked on harder, I guess.
Yeah.
But Contagion is not like that at all. Contagion is so all throughout seasons 1 and 2, especially, it feels like oftentimes they're trying to recapture the glory of original Star Trek. They're trying to replicate the beats of that show a lot. And
Yeah.
not surprisingly, really, because there hasn't been a Star Trek show for 20 years. So it makes
Yeah.
sense that they would do that. And Gene Roddenberry is in charge of TNG at the beginning. So, yeah, why wouldn't they do that? I guess it makes sense. Play on what's successful. Um, but unlike, I don't know, The Naked Now or certain other episodes that are not really coming to mind directly right now, but which I'm sure we've mentioned before, Contagion doesn't really feel like any particular original series episode. It just has
Yeah.
a bit of the vibe, and it's does it really well. And there's several different things going on. There's a computer virus. There's an archaeology expedition. There's ancient, powerful aliens. There's Romulans, uh, and they're all together worked out into this really satisfying whole. I think the story has a lot of atmosphere to it. You get to see Picard do his archaeology thing for the first time. Uh, the stakes seem pretty high, so a lot of the time in the early episodes, and some of the later ones too, the cold open, which is the technical, I guess, semi-technical term for the pre-credit sequence, is weird. Like sometimes it's oddly out of place, or it seems to end at the wrong moment. It's sometimes a little weird, but Contagion has the perfect cold open. Uh, you see the sister ship of the Enterprise, Yamato, and again, this is a ship that we already kind of saw before in Where Silence Has Lease. It looks exactly like the Enterprise. So when we see it blow up at the end of the cold open, it's like, geez, this is a really big deal. That's no good. What's going to happen now, right? It's actually one of my favorite cold opens in the whole series. We got to see the ship.
What are you on now? I just lost my internet for a minute, so I didn't hear some of what you said.
Oh crap! Yeah, I was saying it's one of my favorite cold opens of the whole series. That the cold open of that episode of, okay, we get introduced to the Yamato and its captain, and then it just blows up, and it's like, holy shit, the stakes seem really high, right? And
yeah,
the Oconians are an interesting race that we never see really, but we know a bit of their history, I guess, and they have a very powerful teleportation technology that makes Enterprise transporters look like child toys, and the virus. It's cool because the episode is called Contagion, so you kind of think that it's going to be a outbreak of a virus in the crew or something like that, but it's not. It's a computer virus, and I would remind everybody that this episode aired in 1988. Computer viruses were a very new concept at that time, so the first virus was actually created in 1986 in Pakistan, and so 1988 we'd seen a few other ones, mostly for MS-DOS, and I mean, compared to nowadays malware and crap, those old viruses seem kind of child's play. It's like it doesn't seem. I mean, some of them could be pretty malicious, but what they always used to tell you in antivirus studies and stuff like that, which of course, I was kind of interested in the concept of that in the early 90s, right? And they would always tell you, well, actually, the really malicious ones that like basically destroy your operating system or whatever, they don't survive long because those they are more interested in being destructive than actually staying hidden for a long time, and it's the ones that stay hidden that are the most effective because you want your creation to spread and not really destroy shit right away, because as soon as that happens, the person can't spread the virus anymore. So it's like, what's the point almost, right? It's just like just being destructive for destructive's sake. And I don't know. So so the concept was really new at that time. And here's, I guess one potentially unsatisfying thing is you never really learn what the outcome will be. Like at one point, Data gets infected, and I guess my question is, what would be the ultimate result be of Data being infected with the Iconian virus? We never really get to find out, but nevertheless, probably if we did get to find out, the show would have been over and there would have been no more Star Trek TNG. So it's fine. It's like one of those ambiguous questions that's cool to think about. We never quite know the answer. Um, I really like the use of the Romulans in this episode, even though they're not really major players.
Yeah.
At this point, they've been hinted about the series a few times, and we've seen them on the communicator once or twice. But they're not really major players yet in the show. And here we actually do see the Romulan bridge a little bit. And at the end, Picard gets transported to the wrong ship by the Iconian Gateway. So he's like hanging out on the Romulan ship for a few minutes. And the Romulan commander, who I think is played by Carolyn Seymour, would be a Romulan later on. And, it's a really cool actor who's been in a lot of audio drama productions. But anyway, she's like, well, we're probably going to die soon, but you're going to die with us, so I have some satisfaction. And that Picard gets transported away. So there's a lesson in this episode, and that is keep your shields up more often. And that way people can't just use the transporter or something, right? But I love this episode. It's one of my favorite of season 2, without doubt. Everything about it is, to me, extremely satisfying. To learn that the writing team that worked on this episode never did any other episodes. So they, especially, it was a partnership between 2 writers, and the guy who worked on it, I can't remember his name, but he was apparently involved with like Marvel Comics and stuff like that. And he didn't like working on it. So he was one of the guys that complained that there were too many rewrites that he had to do himself, and that didn't improve the story. And he said, Gene Roddenberry was a lovely individual, but I'd never want to work on one of his shows again. So too bad. It would have been really cool because they were obviously trying to foster writing talent at this time. So I don't know. It didn't work out. These guys could have done some really awesome things in the future, but as it is, they gave us this one super cool episode, in my opinion. Great atmosphere, great vibe, great Star Trek problem solving, great crew interactions. Seriously, like, there isn't a thing that I would change about this episode, even if I am curious what that original draft was like. Probably, maybe it was different enough that maybe it was better. Who knows? But had a great episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good episode. Okay, we have 12 minutes left, so I'll do one more and then we do some honorable mentions, I'd say.
Okay.
So
that was 10?
What?
That was 10? I think it was.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. I should have numbered this, but I didn't.
Yeah. So. Yeah. One final one I'll do is Timescape, which first of all is just like Disaster earlier, is one of those episodes where the entire ensemble cast, everyone gets something to do. They each have their roles that they play, and everyone gets to participate. And like the next phase you mentioned earlier, it has the Romulans that don't fit in. But in this episode, they are actually aliens who exist in the warp drive of the Romulans.
Oh, yes.
And overall, it's just an episode with lots of neat ideas about the different pockets of time traveling at a different speed. It has a great scene of the fruit rotting in front of Picard, and then Picard sticks his hand in there and starts screaming, and his fingernails get really long.
Yeah.
Or Troy is stuck in time, or she sees the others stuck in time. And And they go on the Enterprise with their personal shielding, and Picard goes crazy and draws a smiley face onto a warp core breach. It's just lots of neat little ideas on how to play with the story. Like they have a premise with pockets of time moving at different speeds, and you could tell the writers really had fun with it, really enjoyed writing it, coming up with little ideas on how to flesh out this time distorted scenario.
Yeah, that's one I definitely enjoy. I think I don't know. I think at this point I'm kind of struggling to pick episodes that are a little bit, I guess, original. And then I think this episode does a lot of what TNG does best, in that it starts out with a really bizarre, cool mystery that you don't know what the hell is happening, right? And it's kind of unnerving to see them freeze, like and it starts out so companionably with Troy, Riker, and not Riker, Picard and Data on the runabout, and it's just like everybody's relaxed and chill, and you have no idea till halfway through the episode, maybe, that something might have happened to the Enterprise. And that seems like the way to do it, right? Like what that episode of the show Enterprise did wrong, in my opinion, was showing so much of the Enterprise perspective, right?
Yeah.
And doing it really early on, which is a huge mistake, right? Like, why would you? I don't know. Like, if you're writing something dramatic, why would you undercut it like that? Like, it's totally unnecessary, right? And it shows a certain lack of confidence in your own storytelling if you can't even focus on the drama of the situation. Be like, hey, something really shitty might have happened while these people are away, right? And they have no idea. And so you want to keep the audience unaware of what that might be until the last possible moment. And Timescape definitely does a good job of that.
Yeah. And it's just so full of cool ideas. Like Geordi basically gets killed, and the way to save him is to take his shield off, so he gets frozen in time until they figure out how to make time move backwards.
It was really funny when that episode first aired. I had this buddy, right, who he was like my best friend for years when we were growing up. And every so often we would convince each other to watch a show that the other liked, right? So I convinced him to watch some Star Trek. But because of the way this dude was, sometimes I couldn't be sure if he was telling the truth. Like, he would make up shit. So I didn't get to watch this episode the first time. I had to miss it for one reason or another, and he watched it. And I'm like, oh, what happened during Star Trek? And he was like telling me about the episode. And like, kind of thinking in the back of my head, oh, I didn't say this to him because I'm one of those people who believes you should let people be whatever they want to be and not like contradict them, at least not on, and not to their faces necessarily, because you want them to, if they want to be creative, fine, let them, right? But I was thinking in the back of my head, did that really happen during the episode, or is it just bullshitting, right? So, I watched the episode later. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that really did happen, and they were frozen like that. It's cool.
Yeah,
and good one.
Lots of crazy stuff in that episode. That's why I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, good choice, definitely. All right, so I don't know if it's a fan favorite. Matter of Honor.
Matter of Honor.
Matter of
most
Honor.
Most likely a fan favorite. Yeah.
Might be a fan favorite. Okay. Yeah. Well. I'm not in touch, so I don't know. Always a good episode. We did our Klingon episode, so I think we probably already
Yeah,
talked about this one a fair bit.
yeah,
So I won't dwell on it too much. But yeah, Riker. I watched it again recently because, like I said, we were watching season 2, and
yeah,
so yeah. I mean, it's kind of. I didn't remember how much of the episode was actually before Riker went onto the Klingon ship, and it was like him preparing for everything. And normally, I guess I might be sort of, hey, get to the point. Wait, put Riker on the Klingon ship. Let's see it already, right? But
yeah,
I guess I don't really mind it. Here, I think it's sort of cool because it seems like a big deal. Like we kind of know the Klingons are rough, and
yeah,
Riker might have a hard time. So it's kind of good to see him preparing himself in whatever ways that he can. One thing I'm surprised they didn't show was him like saying to Worf, "Hey, bring me on another of your calisthenic programs, and like let me practice some hand-to-hand combat." But they did a lot of other things. They had him eating Klingon food and
yeah,
practicing on the shooting range with Picard, and all this stuff. And yeah, there's the other alien ensign who comes aboard the ship, who has a different way of thinking and
yeah,
doesn't really jive with Picard's command strategy, where he's like not telling them something really important because he doesn't have enough information about it. So
yeah,
I mean, it could seem ridiculous, but it's not. Like I get it. I'm kind of like that too. I'm like, why would I go to the boss and talk to them about a problem I'm having when I don't really know how to replicate it, or I don't really know a lot of the details. I mean, I come up with this shit at work sometimes where I'm just sort of like, yeah, there's a problem, but I don't really know what it is. So I'm not going to run to my superiors and be like, oh, no, I
yeah,
have a problem. Help me. Like, it's sort of like I need to figure out what the issue is before I can solve it or before anybody can solve it. So I get it. I get where this guy's coming from. It doesn't seem like he's one of those Star Trek. He's not one of those Star Trek characters that you boo and hiss at because he's
yeah,
doing the wrong thing. And
yeah,
he's not cool with Picard.
mm,
It's not like that. I get it. I am on his
yeah,
side a little bit at least. So and yeah, the Klingons are great. Obviously, Captain's pretty cool. Riker, seeing Riker hold his own with the Klingons is a lot of fun. Even though there's not much of it, there's only like one or two scenes really,
mm,
and everything is based on that. So it's kind of a remarkable thing that TNG does sometimes, where everything we base our opinions on is based on like one or two important scenes.
yeah,
Uh, some of the rest is arguably fluff, but I don't know. This episode does a good job of not having like the fluff is not very fluffy. It
yeah,
feels earned, and it's in the right place. So yeah, I mean, hey, I would have happily seen Riker on the Klingon ship more, but I don't know. They did it well, so I'm not really complaining.
well, well, it's Klingon fluff, which is fluff with daggers and violence and blood wine and gah.
Yeah, but yeah, probably you're right. Probably a fan favorite, and yeah, talked
Yeah,
about a little bit during our Klingon episode. We didn't
yeah,
mention any other Klingon centric episodes in this. Maybe we assume
yeah,
they're all fan favorites. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I just realized that I had no reason to be nervous because I remember we are on a different streaming platform, so we don't actually have a 2-hour time limit.
Oh,
So there was no reason for me to get nervous about the time limit. There isn't one.
are we getting close?
No, like I was just saying, there isn't a time limit here. That was on
Yeah,
the other streaming platform we previously used.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well,
But still, we've been going at it for 2 hours. Do you still have any important mentions? I think I have most of my important ones out of the way. Like night terrors, I could describe in one sentence. I like the scenes where they don't get sleep and go crazy.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And the other one I had, which I can describe in one sentence, is The Loss, where Deanna Troi loses her empathic abilities because of some two-dimensional aliens. It's just a cool character episode for
Deanna Troi and Flatland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember really liking that episode very much, but I don't know. I haven't seen it in a while, so.
Well, it's one of the nowadays people would call it woke. It's about disabled people or people becoming disabled due to accident or illness, and how they get treated differently by society and stuff like that. And I don't know. For me, it just kind of worked because it was one of those rare character episodes for Deanna Troi, which they didn't give her much. So I thought it was cool when they did.
So one of the I didn't put it in my list, but another one featuring Choi prominently, and I don't know if this is a fan favorite or not. Survivors.
No, that's an episode that rarely gets mentioned, but it's not bad at all.
What's that?
It rarely gets mentioned, but it's not bad at all. It's actually a good episode, just very overlooked.
So I find the beginning of this episode, the first half or whatever, to be very spooky. Like kind of.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like dark, almost like Dark Shadows or something like that, with the music box and the like. I don't know. It's very effective, and then I don't know. I don't know about the idea that this it's another kind of godlike alien who decides to live among humans. And he's really, really powerful, I guess, but chooses not to use any of that until something really terrible happens, and then he does, and it's the results are the deaths of billions of creatures, billions of people, really. And I think they do maybe a decent job of portraying the tragedy of the situation, but it perhaps, again, it's perhaps too compressed. Like, I'm not sure it's 100% effective as an episode, but it's mostly effective, and it has a lot of pathos to it, and then the opening stuff is pretty freaky. You kind of realize, like, I'm definitely Marita Service gets to do some pretty over the top emoting, and she's experiencing psychic trauma and stuff, and it's good. It's good. It's one of those episodes that has a bit of a supernatural feeling to it, which I like. It's not generally something that Star Trek does, but it's something that I personally am a fan of, so I enjoy it.
And definitely great overacting by Marina Sirtis, and she really sells it. That hearing that melody in her head over and over and over again. As a viewer, I can really imagine how that would drive a person completely crazy. Like 24 hours a day, that melody repeating.
Yeah. So I just I guess the way Star Trek TNG handles the telepathy thing and empathy is like sort of odd. I always liked the way Blake Seven did it, where it's like a telepath is a sender, and the fact that nobody else is a sender is a huge problem for a telepath because it makes them very alone. So
Yeah.
it's like, the rest of the human crew don't have the abilities that the telepath has, and that they, um, they never send anything. All they can do is receive. So it's a different approach to telepathy that I actually really like, and Star Trek doesn't really do that. And I guess Troy, because she's only half Metazoid, she's not like she can't speak to another person's mind the way Loxana can. Uh, but she can certainly receive some very powerful impulses, and yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
happens to her. Uh, I don't know. It's one of the few effective uses of the character, even though she is like writhing in pain through a lot of the episode. So, yeah, I don't know. It's good. It's effective.
Yeah. I have an honorary mention that I'm fairly sure is a fan favorite, and I briefly mentioned it before, and it's Relics, the Scotty episode.
Okay.
Just has the Dyson sphere and suspending people in transporter buffers for decades. It has just lots of cool science fiction ideas, and it has James Doohan. And it
Yeah.
has the bridge, original Enterprise bridge, which they partially rebuilt for the holodeck.
The Dyson Sphere, they should really call it the Stapleton Sphere, because the British science fiction author Olaf Stapleton actually came up with the idea of a Dyson Sphere in the 1930s and was not credited. But nevertheless, yeah, cool episode with Scotty. It's kind of, I guess my favorite thing about it is thinking that Scotty survived that way. I think it seems cool. It's very him kind of in a way. Um, I guess I never really loved that episode. I'm not sure why. I think maybe it's just like bringing back TOS characters was always kind of a little bit dicey.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like Scotty's like useless for a lot of the episode, and I don't know, recreating the bridge of the original Enterprise. Like, I don't know. It just seems like the character is more sad than I would have wanted. Maybe, I don't know. Just I guess it's not terrible or anything, but I don't know. I don't love that for some reason.
I felt they made it work, but I can see how someone would feel differently.
Yeah, and he kind of obviously it makes sense that he and Geordi would be friends, right? So
yeah, kind of a shame that Barkley isn't in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Again, it's one I haven't watched in a while, so I would like to maybe revisit it at some point. But I do remember it fairly well. But actually, it was one of the ones, the episodes to get novelized. I don't really know why they novelized that one, because they didn't really do a lot of the one-part episodes. Most of the two-part ones, at least up to, I don't know actually. For some reason, Chain of Command, I don't think got one, but a lot of the other two-parters got novelizations.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of the ones besides Relics got one, but I guess somebody thought to sort of expand the story a bit, so that's cool. It's maybe something that deserved a little more, I think, than what was shown on screen. So
yeah, a few days ago, a week ago, I think, I watched all the deleted scenes that are on the TNG Blu-ray set.
Oh,
and
tell me about those. I'm going to be listening. I have to take a quick break. But,
like Relics has a scene where Scotty is depressed, and then Counselor Troy comes to him, and then he asks what her job is, and then freaks out because she thinks he needs to see a psychiatrist. But I'm not crazy. He feels like he is being treated like a crazy person just because he's a bit out of his depth and just wants to contribute. There's actually a lot of a lot of the deleted scenes have some interesting stuff. Especially Chain of Command has like I think it was like 5 minutes almost of deleted scenes that didn't get into the episode. Mostly of Captain Jellicoe explaining situations and trying to get through to the crew that the job needs to be done no matter if Picard is alive or dead. So that's fascinating. That's just one of the many great reasons to get the Blu-ray set.
All right. Sorry about that, old man. I have a bit of an old man bladder now myself, so just had
I
to
see.
go take care of that. But
Yeah.
so do you you have the TNG Blu-ray then? The all the Blu-ray? Okay. But you watch the deleted scenes. That's
Yeah.
cool. I kind of definitely as somebody who's sort of interested in some of the behind the scenes stuff in general,
Yeah.
not just in Star Trek. You know, I always kind of wonder. A lot of the time now, when I watch sort of mainstream movies where I can find them, I actually do look at the scripts,
Yeah.
which is a really weird, nerdy thing to do that most people
Yeah.
would not do when they watch movies. But I just, you know,
Mhm.
and a lot of the time I see that the script that we have is very different than what actually ends up on screen.
Mm.
And it can be a little bit perplexing at times. You know, you have to like stop it, you know, stop what you're watching and trying to figure out, oh, you know, they just cut out all those scenes or whatever, or they just like change this or that, the other thing.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a shame. Like we talked about schisms earlier, when they arrive from one step to the next too fast.
Yeah.
Because of the time limit. And on the Blu-ray set, there's also that extended edition of Measure of a Man, which is, let me check how much longer it is.
Oh yeah.
I'll just check. Where is
How
it?
much? We're close to the 2 hour mark.
It's 15 minutes longer, and all the scenes that were added for the extended edition, it's just character moments.
So we got time. We got time to mention a couple more then.
No, I was talking about Measure of a Man. We don't have a time limit, remember? We don't have a time limit here.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, so there's okay, yeah. Interesting. So we should mention, since we're talking about honorable mentions, the one that we both kind of talked about, that is another example of the aliens fucking with us episode, where Silence has lease.
Yeah, absolute classic.
So early season 2 episode.
Yeah.
I think it feels like a first in a lot of ways because, yeah, I mean, season 2 is weird because you can tell that, like season 1, they're still trying to find their footing.
Yeah.
And everybody you read about or watch whatever, talk about it, says how much the writers' strike that was going on in the United States at that time for the film and TV industry affected season 2, right? So it's the reason season 2 is shorter. It's the reason they used Star Trek Phase 2 episode to start the series. It's the reason Shades of Grey exists. It's the reason that there are other really subtle things that it might have been sort of an influence on. And interesting theory that I came across on the internet was that the reason there were more character bits in season 2 than in season 1, more stuff like where you just kind of see the crew hanging out, is that a lot of the scripts were underwritten, and so they needed to find ways to fill the time. And so this was an easy thing that almost any basic TV writer could do, not necessarily somebody who was a dedicated script writer for Star Trek. You know what I mean? If they just like, okay, let's have the crew hang out and play poker, right? Like, why not? Right? Let's have Worf and Riker on the holodeck doing some weird battle like scenario thing, and they did that and made use of it really well. I think they were able to, and you know, one of the things that's always fascinated me about TV and film production is the things that you have to do just to bring across what you want to bring across within the time limit that you have and the monetary budget that you have and various other limitations that might present themselves to you at the last possible moment that you have to deal with. And it's heroic, in my opinion, that a lot of TV and films are even made, right? Because unlike a book, and I'm probably more of a reader than a TV guy, but like unlike a book, which is usually mostly the product of a single individual and their vision. With a TV production, there has to be dozens of people that are at least more or less on the same page. And things can go wrong, and very often do go wrong. And Star Trek TNG almost didn't work, you know, like like as much as I champion season 1 and 2, I like reading about it now. I kind of see why so many people were unhappy with it at the time, and you know, in retrospect, it even seems worse. Like, you know, people frown on it and stuff, and like recently somebody pointed out, like, if you look at season 3 and 4, the number of like just passable to really good episodes is higher than the number of passable to really good episodes early on. So I will give them that, and I will say yes, there is a point where I have to agree, I guess, with the general consensus. But season 2, I will usually stand up for. I think that the best episodes of season 2 are certainly a lot more fun and interesting than the boring episodes of season 5 or 7 or something like that, right? So I mean, this is aliens fucking with us episode. It's eerie. It's weird. It's the Enterprise is stuck in a hole in space and they can't get out. And it turns out there's this nasty alien face that's experimenting with them and psychologically torturing them. They do the self-destruct thing. The only thing I don't like about it is the final scene where the alien shows up to kind of say to Picard, "Would you like to hear my findings?" And like, I don't know. I don't really know if that was necessary. I think they could have left that out, and the episode would have been just as effective. I kind of get why it's there, because it's interesting because you can feel the conflict that the writers were having, because again, Roddenberry was like, this is my Star Trek. It's my sandbox. And I say that humans have conquered a lot of adversity and don't have a lot of struggles anymore with their internal conflicts. And there's no conflict with the crew. And crime in the 24th century doesn't exist the way we know it now. And the writers were like, but that's not very interesting. That's like not very compelling to write about. And so what they started to do in the second season, and in Q Who it's there too, is showing this idea that, hey, maybe humans in the 24th century are actually arrogant, and like maybe they need to be taken down a peg or two. And the alien in Where Silence Has Leaves points this out, but it's a little bit hypocritical because the alien's been like psychologically tormenting them and killed a crew member
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Like he didn't need to point that out, I think we
Yeah.
already kind of know, right? So just saying like, oh, you humans are so arrogant and
Yeah.
you're unsatisfied with anything and you can't you never find tranquility and all this. Like I don't know, it's just a bit on the nose, but in general, I like the atmospheric qualities of this episode a lot. So it's
Yeah.
it's, uh, probably won't bring it up again in the future, but it's
Yeah.
just yeah, it's a good one.
And it's the first time the name Yamato is mentioned, even though this one was fake.
Is what?
First time the name Yamato is mentioned, even though this Yamato is not real.
Oh yeah. Yes.
And yeah, even though we don't have a time limit, I think we should wrap things up because I can feel myself needing my medication again.
Okay, one of those.
Starting
Yeah.
to feel a bit uneasy.
All right. Yeah. I mean, there's one or two more I could mention, but I don't really have to. It's just like, it was spared
well,
because.
Just if you can do it in one sentence, then
Yeah. Okay.
definitely.
I know I tend to go on. So, there's actually one I wanted to ask you about because I didn't get to rewatch it, and I do remember it being kind of special. And it's one that it doesn't get talked about much. That's The First Duty,
Yeah.
which is a Wesley Crusher featured episode, and we don't really talk about that too much.
Yeah.
I for one do not mind Wesley Crusher. I will say it right now. I do find it sort of amusing the way he was used early on, and I can see why Shut Up Wesley is a thing. I get it, but I don't really have malice against the character, so I don't know. But I haven't watched this episode, so what do you like in a long time? So do you like this episode?
Yes, and I don't know if the episode itself is a fan favorite, but it has a fan favorite Picard speech.
Yeah.
The first duty of a Starfleet officer is to the truth. Blah 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 truth and blah 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 truth. Classic Picard speech, and has an interesting once again a procedural kind of thing where they try to figure out what really happened during the spacecraft maneuver and figure out who's guilty and who killed that guy.
Yeah.
So that's classic TNG. I mean, it's one thing to say that TNG is formulaic, but on the other hand, when you can say this episode is classic TNG, that's basically a compliment.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting perspective. I'd like to watch that again. Maybe I will do that in the next little while. One thing I remember reading, and I think it was the TNG Companion, was that at the end of the episode, as originally scripted, Wesley was not going to admit what happened.
I see.
And they changed that after in the final draft. So it was going to be a little more heavy, at least in that sense.
Yeah.
So interesting. Again, showing how much one has to compromise sometimes for the TV audience. It happens, right? And it's like you understand the reasons why, but it's just kind of interesting to see where things maybe started.
But in the end, that was the reason why DS9 got so much darker when they had when the writers had their own control, and that's why after Star Trek, Ron Moore immediately went to Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, which was even darker than Deep Space Nine, because of the limitations from TNG.
Yeah, and in Deep Space Nine, you get a lot of instances where characters don't seem to really do what would have been considered previously on Star Trek the right thing, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's a really good point. Really good point for sure. Okay, I think that's as far as I'll go. Probably I had like one or two more, but it's not really. They probably don't need to get mentioned. They're honorable mentions almost. So
I see.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, man, this was good. I wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah, if people want to leave comments and say what their I guess underappreciated episode might be. We actually covered a lot
Yeah.
of ground tonight.
Yeah, definitely.
A ton of stuff. So we
Yeah.
talked about a lot of episodes at length. So
Yeah, I think you could fill an entire season with the number of episodes we mentioned.
oh yeah. Oh,
Definitely had over 20.
cool. So next time we come back, we're going to talk about something else. We might talk about time travel episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I got some preparing to do.
Yeah, me too. But that's a good thing. Always nice to have an excuse to watch Star Trek.
Hey, never a bad thing to need an excuse to watch Star Trek is all right, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, I've definitely been enjoying returning to the Next Generation. I always, would watch an episode occasionally. It's one of those shows where I kind of feel sometimes like there's a lot of filler, but at the
Yeah.
same time, it's usually enjoyable to watch.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah. Yeah. All right.
All right. So let's wrap this up, and thanks to anybody who watched, and hopefully see you next time. And everybody who watches this after the fact as a video, feel free to show up next time we stream.
Indeed.
And yeah, until next time. And I'm
Until next time.
clicking on end stream.
Good night.